After a long and painful recovery from his wounds received in Tenerife, Nelson was again ready to serve his king. In March 1798, he hoisted his flag aboard the Vanguard and set sail to rejoin Earl St. Vincent off the Spanish port of Cadiz. After retreating from the Mediterranean in 1796, it was now time for the British Navy to return. Nelson's orders were to take a detached squadron of ships past Gibraltar and to hunt down the French. Intelligence had told Lord St. Vincent that the French were on the move and in large numbers. What it hadn't told him was their destination. In command of the French operation was General Napoleon Bonaparte. His mission to invade Egypt and to travel overland to India in order to destroy British possessions in the east. Napoleon sailed on the 19th of May with nearly 40,000 troops aboard 400 transports, accompanied by 13 battleships. Fighting the weather and a lack of reliable information, Nelson hunted for the enemy. Whispers and guesswork would send his squadron in one direction and then another. The French proved very elusive. One of history's greatest what-ifs occurred during this hunt, when the British and French fleets passed each other in the night. If they had known, and the fleets engaged, Napoleon's reign may have ended there and then. He would possibly never have made it to Egypt, never crowned himself emperor, and the next 17 years of European war might never have happened. No Austerlitz, and no Waterloo. After months of hunting for the French, with Nelson becoming increasingly despondent, the Admiral decided to check Egypt. Egypt had been visited by Nelson before, earlier in the hunt, but as bad luck would have it, the British arrived before the French, and so the fleet moved elsewhere and only returned to the mouth of the Nile after Napoleon and his army had had the opportunity to disembark and move inland. On the afternoon of the 1st of August 1798, the enemy fleet was discovered at anchor in Aboukir Bay, east of Alexandria. The French Admiral François Bruet had placed his 13 battleships in a line near to the shore and would have considered them to be fairly well protected from attack, especially as he had placed ropes between the ships to prevent an enemy from breaking the line, as had happened at Cape St. Vincent. The French troops had disembarked, and many of the sailors were ashore as part of armed scouting parties looking for food and water for the fleet. They were in no condition to fight. But with the approaching dusk and their defensive position, the French admiral probably felt that time was on his side. Nelson's fleet had been at sea for months. His crews and captains had had time to form themselves into a well-trained fighting unit. And Nelson's relationship with his captains would become legend. This is where his band of brothers was created. By holding regular meetings with his junior officers, by taking their counsel and ensuring that each of them knew what was expected of them, Nelson had forged a virtually unstoppable force. So when this war machine came upon the French at Aboukir, there was only one expected result. Despite the approaching night, Nelson attacked. Captain Thomas Foley of the Goliath realized as he approached the enemy that although the French were fairly close to the shore, they had left more than enough room for his ship to pass down their landward side. Taking the initiative, he steered Goliath between the shoreline and the enemy, catching them totally unprepared. Other British ships passed inside of the line, while more concentrated on the seaward side, resulting in the French fleet being sandwiched by the British. Nelson aboard the Vanguard watched as the inevitable began to unfold before him. His band of brothers took on ship after ship, moving down the French line. As the battle progressed, Nelson was wounded above his remaining good eye and feared that it was his end. "I am killed, remember me to my wife," he said to his flag captain Edward Berry. Fortunately, the wound was not as serious as he thought, and after receiving treatment, he was back on the quarterdeck of the Vanguard in time to witness the spectacular final destruction of the French flagship L'Orient. The French Admiral François Bruet aboard L'Orient refused to surrender. Even when he had been horrifically wounded in the head and arm, Bruet would not retire, stating that his place was on the quarterdeck. The bravery of François Bruet is almost beyond belief. His ship was mortally wounded and on fire. His head and arm were bleeding profusely, and later a cannonball almost cut him in two. Still, he continued to direct the action. The fire aboard L'Orient was spreading out of control. British ships saw this and disengaged, knowing that the inevitable was imminent. Nelson returned on deck just in time to witness the mighty explosion that ripped the heart out of L'Orient. As the fire spread to the powder magazine, the ship tore itself apart. Just after 10 p.m, debris, men, rigging and cannons were thrown hundreds of feet into the air, with the scene of the battle illuminated for miles around. The French flagship and her valiant admiral were no more. Of the 13 French ships at anchor that day, only 2 escaped. One, the Guillaume Tell, carried the French Rear Admiral Pierre de Villeneuve, the man who would later command the combined French and Spanish fleet off Cape Trafalgar. The total destruction of the French at Aboukir Bay was unprecedented. The face of naval warfare had changed forever.